Good afternoon and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today, for the first time, we are looking at a tea from Korea. It's another post-fermented or dark tea. And in this case, it is Boseong Jungjak Balhyocha, which is from the vendor Watcha. Now, Boseong is one of the three tea-growing regions of Korea. It's down in the southwest. Jungjak refers to a growing season or a growing season of the tea in terms of when it's harvested, and it's the third harvest of the year, sort of early summertime, between May and June. So in that sense, it's a sort of reference to quality as well as simple chronology. It's a bit like the difference between sencha and bansha leaves in Japan. Now, Balhyocha is an interesting tea because at one and the same time, it is also known as Hwangcha, which means yellow tea. Balhyo means fermented. So it has two names, yellow tea or fermented tea. However, yellow tea in this sense does not refer to yellow tea in the Chinese sense of a yellow tea. It's in part describing the fact that this tea is not as fully oxidized as a black tea, or as they would be called in the East, a red tea. Now, the reason for that is technically it's partially oxidized, almost to the point of being a black tea, but not quite there. So you may also think of it as a very heavily oxidized oolong, but with some of the characteristics that you'd associate with a black tea. On top of that, which is where the confusion comes from, it is at one and the same time also fermented. So it's both fermented and oxidized. Or if we want to boil it down to what would be the most likely set of commonalities, a fermented, almost fully oxidized black tea, which is why on the nose there's some elements of black tea, but it's not fully there. In the same way, when I brewed this in the past, it's got some of that slightly bitter qualities you associate with the black tea, but it's also lighter and more refreshing. And this is actually an attempt at brewing the tea at a slightly higher temperature. I brewed this at 90 degrees, and I wasn't quite convinced it had reached its full potential. So believe it or not, I've had this tea brewing the whole time we've been talking, and that gets us to the 5-minute mark. We may actually get this under 5 minutes, this review, for once. So 95 degrees centigrade, 180 mils of water in our 180 ml teapot, and 1.8 grams of tea. And let's see how that comes out. Color-wise, I would say a kind of bronze color. Again, it's got a good strong smell, a bit like the koji fermented tea. I can smell it from here. It's very rich and very smooth, quite sweet. Something of a black tea about it, that bitterness, and yet an element of fermentation. It's a bit like a very dark toffee, like a treacle toffee, where it's sweet and bitter at the same time. Let's try the taste. I'm glad I repeated this video, bumping the temperature up to 95. That flavor is very satisfying. It's quite refreshing at the same time. It's sweet. There were hints of black tea in there, the bitterness, and there's definitely a hint of fermentation. As I say, it's very rich and it's very refreshing. So let's wrap this up and see if we can speed run a video for once. What's the tea like? Let's think in terms of our three-way recommendation. Is it readily available? Well, I know of at least 4 vendors in the UK where this can be purchased, and I'm pretty certain, although I didn't look much further afield, that it won't be hard to find at least one example. There are plenty of producers of this tea, so that means the likelihood is plenty of vendors as well. Is it easy to brew? The only downside to this tea is because there were so many variants in terms of the season the tea leaves are harvested from, the region, the particular producer and their interests, their likes and their dislikes, it's hard to get one definitive set of brewing parameters. Watcha, whose brewing parameters are usually absolutely spot on, I bumped this up by 5 degrees to 95 degrees centigrade, which is not a reflection on Watcha, it's probably more to do with my palate. I felt it was a little thin brewing it at 90. So if you don't mind taking the time to tweak your own brewing parameters, I'll put my teeth back in, then I think you will find you can get this just the way you want it. And I recommend the taste. It's sweet. It's got some interesting bitterness creeping in, which you may not think of with a dark tea or any tea that is quite so sweet. If you like sweet teas, you'll like this. The black tea isn't really the black tea notes aren't going to appeal to someone who wants a builder's tea, but it's very different if you want to try a very different kind of post-fermented or dark tea. I think the thing it most reminds me of is a very sweet and slightly thinner koji fermented tea with the savory notes swapped out for the black tea notes. Yeah, I would think if you think in those terms, it's not far off. Anyway, I can heartily recommend this tea, and all I have to do now is bid you happy steeping and to say God bless.